stop working on your goals. Yes, you heard that correctly. The conventional approach of tackling big, ambitious projects head on is precisely why you keep procrastinating year after year. Instead, I want you to spend the next few minutes learning the physics-based approach that transformed my own relationship with procrastination. This isn't about motivation or morning routines. It's about understanding the hidden force that keeps ambitious people stuck in patterns of inaction. Have you noticed that your goals from last January are suspiciously similar to the ones you set this year? You're not alone, and it's not a coincidence. Meet Sarah, a high-achieving marketing executive who's been writing the same 3 goals in her journal every January for the past 5 years. Lose 15 pounds, write that business book, and launch my side project. Despite her impressive career trajectory and reputation as someone who gets things done, these personal goals remain stubbornly unfulfilled, trapped in what researchers call the annual resolution reset. Sarah represents millions of ambitious individuals caught in this peculiar time loop. She's tried everything the productivity gurus recommend: setting smart goals, creating detailed plans, using accountability partners, and tracking her progress in meticulously designed spreadsheets. Yet somehow, each attempt only seems to reinforce the cycle of incomplete goals. The conventional wisdom isn't just failing her, it's actively making the problem worse. What Sarah doesn't realize is that each time she recommits to these same goals without changing her approach, she's strengthening a psychological trap. Every January that she writes "lose 15 pounds" with renewed enthusiasm, only to abandon her gym routine by February, her brain is forming stronger negative associations with that goal. This creates what psychologists call goal fatigue, a phenomenon where our motivation system actually delivers diminishing returns the more times we set and fail at the same objective. Think about what happens in your own mind when you look at a task you've repeatedly failed to complete. That heaviness you feel isn't laziness. It's your brain sending warning signals based on past experiences. Last time you tried this, it didn't end well, your neural pathways whisper. Let's avoid that pain again. This creates a feedback loop that makes procrastination not just likely, but neurologically inevitable. What's particularly insidious about this cycle is how it affects ambitious people. Your high standards and drive for excellence become weapons used against you. You become convinced that if you could just find more discipline or willpower, you'd finally break through. "I just need to try harder this time," you tell yourself, completely misdiagnosing the actual problem. The real issue isn't your character or commitment, it's the structure of your approach. Systems thinking teaches us that outcomes are determined more by the design of the system than by the individual components within it. When a high-achieving person consistently fails at certain goals, blaming their discipline is like blaming a fish for not climbing a tree. The problem isn't the fish, it's the expectation. This is where most productivity advice goes fundamentally wrong. It focuses on changing you, making you more disciplined, more organized, more committed, rather than changing the system that's setting you up for failure. The traditional approach essentially says, the structure is fine, you're broken. When in reality, the opposite is true. The breakthrough comes when you realize that your struggles have less to do with personal shortcomings and more to do with a fundamental principle of physics that governs everything in the universe. The same force that keeps planets in orbit and determines how objects move through space also controls your ability to start working on that presentation or lacing up your running shoes. This principle is the law of inertia, Newton's first law of motion. Just as an object at rest tends to stay at rest unless acted upon by an external force, your ambitious plans remain just plans until you overcome the initial resistance to starting. And here's where ambitious people often create an impossible situation for themselves. The grander your vision, the greater the inertia you must overcome to begin. Understanding inertia explains why your ambitious plans keep failing, but more importantly, it reveals exactly how to break free from this cycle once and for all. That force keeping you glued to the couch instead of working on your business plan isn't laziness. It's a fundamental law of the universe. Newton's first law of motion doesn't just govern celestial bodies. and physical objects. It's silently controlling your productivity and achievement. And once you understand this principle, you'll see why your ambitious nature has actually been working against you all along. Let's look at inertia through the lens of human behavior. Just as objects at rest require an external force to move, your brain requires a specific amount of activation energy to shift from planning into action. This principle operates whether you're contemplating a workout routine, a creative project, or a business strategy. The fascinating part, this activation energy isn't fixed. It varies dramatically based on how we frame the task in our minds. Think about what happens when you set an ambitious goal. Your brain immediately calculates the massive amount of energy required to accomplish it, creating what psychologists call an inertia threshold. This threshold represents the minimum force needed to transition from inaction to action. For ambitious people, this threshold often becomes insurmountable because we frame our tasks in their entirety rather than as manageable initial steps. When facing a book writing project, your mind doesn't see write a few paragraphs today. It visualizes the entire 300-page manuscript and the months of revisions and the intimidating publishing process. No wonder you suddenly find yourself checking email, scrolling social media, or organizing your desk, activities that offer immediate dopamine rewards without triggering your brain's resistance mechanisms. Each person has unique inertia thresholds for different activities. You might find it relatively easy to start a workout, but nearly impossible to begin writing. Or perhaps cleaning your apartment requires minimal activation energy, while making that important business call feels like pushing a boulder uphill. Understanding your personal inertia profile is the first step towards strategic intervention. The good news? Physics offers two remarkably effective solutions for breaking inertia. The first is the micro-step approach. Instead of committing to write your entire business plan, commit to writing just 50 words, roughly 2 sentences. The psychological difference is profound. Your brain no longer calculates the massive energy required for the complete project. It only needs to overcome the minimal resistance associated with those 50 words. The second method is the 2-minute rule. When facing resistance toward any task, commit to doing it for just 2 minutes, then give yourself permission to stop. This technique works because it dramatically lowers the stakes, making the initial push manageable. Want to start exercising? Don't commit to a 45-minute workout. Just put on your gym clothes and move for 2 minutes. The fascinating result? Once you've started, continuing becomes dramatically easier. This paradox defies conventional productivity advice that emphasizes ambitious targets. Consider a real-world example. As firing writers who commit to just 50 words often produce more content over time than those who set 5,000-word daily goals. Why? Because the micro-scale writers actually start writing consistently, while the ambitious goal setters remain paralyzed by the perceived effort required. The same principle applies across domains. Cleaning your house for the duration of just one song leads to more consistent tidying than scheduling a full weekend deep clean. Meditating for 1 minute daily builds a more sustainable practice than attempting 30-minute sessions from the outset. Once you overcome that initial resistance, once you get the object in motion, physics continues working in your favor. The same law that kept you stuck now keeps you moving forward. This explains why that 2-minute commitment often extends to 20 minutes or more. Once you're in motion, continuing requires significantly less energy than starting required. This counterintuitive approach reveals the great paradox of achievement. Ambitious people accomplish more by initially aiming lower. By reducing the activation energy required to start, you create momentum that ultimately carries you toward your larger vision. You're not abandoning your ambition. You're strategically working with the laws of physics rather than against them. So here we are at the crossroad between ambition and achievement. The truth is, your big dreams aren't the problem. You have the vision, the intelligence, and the drive. What's missing isn't more motivation. It's a physics-based approach to getting started. Martin Luther King Jr. wisely observed, "You don't have to see the whole staircase. Just take the first step." But I'll add something crucial. Make that first step ridiculously small. So small it seems almost insignificant. Because the secret to overcoming inertia isn't in grandiose planning. It's in that tiny initial movement that breaks the spell of stillness. The real question facing you now isn't about your capability. We both know you're capable. It's about whether you're willing to temporarily lower your standards, to write just 50 words instead of a chapter, to run for 5 minutes instead of training for a marathon. Are you willing to start so small that failure becomes impossible? Because in that deliberate smallness lies the path to everything you've been putting off.